the McNair Foundation's own, the one and only, the king himself, Mr. Marty McNair. Put your hands together, everybody, and welcome him into the Flex Zone. Mr. McNair, what's going on, man? Did I do a good enough job?
Yeah. Hey, look, let me tell you. If I was sleepy 10 minutes ago after this intro, I'm up now. So you all's enthusiasm, man, definitely got me up laughing and some more stuff. So thank you for having me. And a lot of times, you don't even realize when you're in the trenches getting work done, man, you don't even realize how much you've done until you literally hear somebody say it. It's like, wow, I guess we have done all that. So it's been an interesting journey to say the least. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here, Mr. McNair. I obviously know the unfortunate circumstances of how you became who you are. I mean, we cover Maryland on this channel, like nobody's business. But for those who don't know, I know I read the bio, but I always like to tell people, no one can tell your story better than you can, Mr. McNair. Anything that the people should know who watching you, want to shout out the good people, the McNair Foundation, do your thing.
Yeah, I'm Marty McNair. I'm the father and the co-founder of the Jordan McNair Foundation. So, the interesting thing, whenever I tell Jordan's story, most people already know it. But for those who all that don't know it, Jordan was a University of Maryland football player that had succumbed to a heat-related injury on the second day of practice as a sophomore in 2018. As a parent, I didn't even know a heat stroke could be fatal. I'm using the term heat stroke loosely. I thought that if you got overheated, just like probably every other parent, that you got in the sun and you got in the shade, drank some cold water, and all will be right with the world. That is somewhat the case in regards to heat exhaustion. And man, we went from Jordan woke up a healthy kid Tuesday morning, May 28th, 29th of 2018. And unfortunately, we had a emergency liver transplant that Friday, less than 72 hours later, with 85% of his liver being in necrosis. So 85% of his liver was just dead. And you can imagine, like, that was a fast-moving train of information, really just trying to figure out what happened, how it happened, obviously we knew when it happened, but the main goal was really like, how do we make a difference here? And those 2 weeks, Jordan was in the hospital. Every time I would come in the hospital and walk from the front door to shock trauma, the elevators, I would go through this range of emotions. And, one of the main things I kept, I felt this range of emotions from feeling impotent to helpless to angry to, confused. And, because anytime something happens to your child, as a father, you always want to assume, responsibility for that. And for me, I thought I kind of prepared him from everything, that I could prepare him for in his life at that point. Unfortunately, I couldn't prepare him for what I didn't know. And I kept asking myself all these questions when I would walk down the hallway to the elevator, the ICU. And I kept saying, what did I miss? I missed something, right? And I kept asking myself, what did I miss? Did I not ask the right questions? Because when the coaches from University of Maryland at the time were sitting at our kitchen table a few days prior to signing day, I asked the general questions that most parents ask. Can he get some playing time? That was it. I didn't think to ask. I didn't have an innovative mindset at that time. I mean, what could possibly happen at University of Maryland, a Big Ten school? We would have never assumed that the worst could have possibly happened. And ever since then, it was like I felt like I didn't know any statistics in regards to how many student athletes had died at the NCAA level. I didn't know any statistics of any high school student athletes that died from this 100% preventable injury. And I feel like is two things we can do in life when tragedy hits. We can accept it and go into that rabbit hole of depression and despair, or we can do something about it. And I just chose to do something about it. And it was like, I always thought that as a family, we thought Jordan would have played on Sundays. I never had an idea that he would be the poster boy for student athlete safety across the nation.
No, thank you for that. We have your foundation link down below. So if you do want to find out more about Jordan's story, about what Mr. Marty McNair is doing, feel free to check him out. I guess, Dre, before you go, you got some books, man. You've done the media tour. You've been on the sports centers, the Real Sports. I mean, CNN. I mean, like you said, you never thought it would be the way it went. I mean, just talk a little bit about that and what your new book and your previous literary book talk about as well.
Well, one thing I learned about our story was, I learned so many things just in regards when Jordan passed. Luckily, our legal team, we wound up getting the Murphy Falcon, the Murphy legal team, and just really a great group of people. I always tell people that I was a product of Baltimore City, really, and I grew up in the '80s. I'm probably a lot older than a lot of you guys, but I was a childhood delinquent, a teenage delinquent, and it's interesting how I circled back around with Billy Murphy, attorney Billy Murphy, because he was my very first lawyer when I was 15 years old, facing a bunch of serious charges, just, trying to prove myself and all that um, um, misinformed rights of passage into manhood that, we just all kind of taught each other growing up in the 80s, that came from them single parent homes. But anyway, one of the big things that, really the reason that we even got to a national platform is because we didn't say anything. And, the thing about the media is sensationalized news is only hot till the next sensationalized story comes along. So if it had been up to me, I probably would have, Jordan's story might not even made it out of the DMV because, really like so much media attention was surrounding it. And with our story, our big thing was, we wanted to get the facts first before we said anything. And I think, nobody braces themselves to say, hey, a tragedy is about to happen. And when the media comes knocking, and I'm just not going to say anything, you got to have a real strong, level of discipline and a strategy, from a legal perspective, really to kind of get around that. So for in our story, the reason we got to a national platform initially was it was an ESPN reporter by the name of Heather Denick. Heather's on the news every morning talking college football. And Heather, and at Maryland at that particular time under that coaching staff, it wasn't a matter of what was going to happen. It just was a matter of when it was going to happen. So if it wasn't Jordan, it would have been another kid just because of the toxic culture at that time and just really, the way that coaching style was. And for us, Heather had started reaching out to me. I didn't know who she was, had turned over to the legal team, and she earned our trust. And, Heather wrote some stories. Our story just rocked college football. So we really didn't say anything to the media for the first 63 days. The PR person at the firm, a brother by the name of Zach McDaniels. Zach is a mover and a shaker in the city of Baltimore. Y'all probably wouldn't, unless you know Zach personally, you probably wouldn't know how impactful he is just in regards to everything that he does. So make a long story short, we said no comment for the first 63 days. And, we were just really strategically waiting on Heather's story to drop. And when it dropped, like I say, it rocked college football. And man, our very first time speaking, we spoke on Good Morning America. And we just kind of, took that black SUV, that Uber SUV or that Uber Black through New York City, and you name it, every major media platform we could be on, obviously we were on. However, one of the main things that, Jordan's story had garnered so much national attention and stayed in the media for so long that, really we became like a voice for this or the face of this type of injury. Not knowing that, as I mentioned, I didn't know anything about statistics. So Jordan basically was the 18th kid that had died in 18 years. He was the 31st football player that had died in 18 years at the NCAA level of competition. And he pretty much fell in predictable statistics. They were losing 2 to 3 linemen every year from heat stroke or heat-related injury. Who knew? And man, I know, right? I know. 18 years, he was number 31. And another young man died that summer by the name of Braden Bradford. He was a lineman as well. And there was always big guys. And even though we need to update these stats because unfortunately, we've had way too many young people pass from this type of injury since then. I mean, it's just been very, very challenging. But our work really kind of keeps us busy. And the work that I do in regards to the books and all that type of stuff, it's really kind of hard. Our mission was really the awareness, education, and the prevention of heat-related injuries. But, it's kind of hard to talk about heat-related injuries when it's 20 degrees outside or when it's 40 degrees outside. So that's where a lot of our stuff, we were really like the first couple of years while we were in motion, basically it was like, we just kind of stayed peak season. We had 2 seasons, peak season and valley season. meaning, these type of injuries always start happening right around like spring conditioning, summer conditioning, always when kids are trying to get back in the mix, trying to get acclimated to the weather. So we would be super duper busy from obviously May all the way through September, and then we would fall off. We would go into the valley season, and I'm just kind of like, hustling, trying to make some money, speaking engagement, stuff like that. But again, like there was really no consistency beyond outside of our peak season, for lack of a better term. So that's when I really got to, writing books and writing curriculums and all that type of stuff, because one of the main things I think about any type of safety, not just only on the field, but what about off the field as well? I was talking to a friend of mine today, and she was saying how she wanted her son who played baseball. She was a former athlete, and she was basically saying like she wanted it more than him. And as parents, sometimes we can get a little bit, over the top with it, just like saying, okay, hey, you got this potential. And the average kid, when you really look at the landscape of collegiate sports and collegiate recruitment, my new book covers all that type of stuff. The landscape had changed significantly when Jordan was being recruited. It looked totally different. Wasn't no NIL or collectives or any of these types of bargaining chips that were in place to help a family make a decision to go to a school. Really at that time, if you got a lifetime scholarship, you were doing pretty well in regards to, the future of your child in a sense. So now, the whole landscape has changed. It's become a business. And that's really what, our goal is now. Like, how do we're trying to just stay relevant all year long, not only on the field, but how do we keep kids and their families safe off the field as well? Hopefully that answered your question.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dre.
So, Mr. McNair, I got to ask, you said that Jordan was the 31st in 18 years. What are the precautions that people can take so that way this tragedy doesn't happen to others?
Yeah, well, the main thing is, initially, so for us, we thought it was all about safety equipment, right? If they just had a cold water tub on the field, if somebody say if they just had an AD on the field, on the field when these types of things happen or close by, but the main thing is the more and more we got into it, our process was extremely incremental. Like, I thought it was all about initially saying, hey, I'm gonna come out and I'm gonna talk to some kids and I'm gonna talk to some coaches. And we were very football centric that first year or two. And meaning we were just talking to football programs in a sense. But one of the things for me, I kept saying like, well, really, that's like you hear a speaker, right? And they come out and they say some stuff that's very, very impactful and the ether burns off, right? And they're going to motivate you, but eventually the ether's going to burn off and you're going to probably go back to doing the same old thing you've been doing all along. So for me, I kept asking myself, like, what's going to make anything I say stick, to be honest? So we got into the legislative space because obviously if things are mandated from a legislative space, they have to follow these mandates in a sense. And so one of the things I realized early on, or I thought early on was, we kept donating all these cold water tubs, right? And, I'm thinking, if you got the right safety equipment on the field, these types of you're in the space of preventiveness in the sense, preventive preparation to say the least. But, the more I got into it, kids kept dying. And I kept saying, wow, if they got this in place. And then what I realized, it really wasn't even the safety equipment. It was more about the emergency action plan. So what an EAP is, those of us, everybody that's been in a fire drill before, that's an emergency action plan. You go across the street or you go to the safe location. Y'all sit over there until they call everybody back in the building or whatever the case may be. But the main thing is, when you run a fire drill, that's a practice, right? So they're practicing in the event something happens. This is what we're going to do, right? Now, the thing is, you get people when they're off guard and, folks is just kind of like thinking about everything but that. But the interesting thing is when you walk on any type of sports field, regardless of the sport, any type of basketball court or indoor gym, the potential for a fire can happen just like that. So that's what happened in our case was they had an emergency action plan, but it wasn't a practice emergency action plan. So therefore, in Jordan's case, it was almost like a Murphy's Law type thing. If it could have happened, it did happen because, again, somebody made a split decision to say, hey, we're going to go over to this field and practice. Then that when they were calling, now you got construction on campus. So now the EMTs are trying to find where he's at. And all this time, with this type of injury, time is everything. So really that hour and 37 minutes that it took him to get to the ER, all the damage was pretty much done on the field. Because you only, keep in mind, when you have a heat-related injury, it starts off with heat exhaustion. And heat exhaustion isn't a bad thing. It's just when they become mismanaged, right? So in our case, that was a clear example of a heat-related injury being mismanaged because, the athletic trainer on the field or the medical professionals didn't really recognize what was going on at the time. Now, as a parent, a father, who's already in the process of feeling guilty and it's my fault, now you want somebody to blame, right? So what do we do instinctively? We blame somebody. And most of the time, I do coaches training, parent education training, student athlete training. And I tell coaches all the time, parents think you all are medical professionals and you're not, right? You think it's going to be a coach that's going to save your kid at a certain level. It's not. They have medical professionals, or they should have medical professionals in place. That's their job to save your kid. I'm embarrassed to say, I never even knew what an athletic trainer was. And Jordan went to a private school with resources. And when you look at, all these types of things, you got 21,000 high schools across the nation. As of 2024, you have over 8 million student athletes that are participating in high school sports. You had a major influx with girls flag football. They probably put about 3 million added to that number, right, across the nation. But the main thing is schools fall into two categories, right? It's those who have resources and those who don't. So those who have resources can afford an athletic trainer. They got a medical professional on the field. Now, the ones that don't have resources, they can't afford an athletic trainer. So everybody on and they may have the school police officer doubling down as the football coach. We've all seen that, so a lot of times it just depends on, where you are, how educated the people are. And most importantly, back to that emergency action plan, it's like almost saying, what's the purpose of having a cell phone, a smartphone, if you don't know it's smart, or you don't constantly practice, all of the gadgets and the apps and all that type of stuff. So in our case, back to the EAP, what I realized was emergency action plans was really the core to safety all the way across the board. Not only have an emergency action plan, but you got to have a practice emergency action plan. You need to know who's going to do what in the event of, who's going to call 911, who's going to call the parent, who's going to do crowd control, who's going to wave the EMTs in once they get to the field or once they get to the facility. Because nowadays, if you at a park and they got 10 fields, how would they know which one to come to? So a lot of these things we don't think about because, I always ask parents in these types in the youth space, hey, if something happened to your kid right now, what would you do? Oh, I'll call 911 and say what? Do you know the address where we are? Do you know what field we on? Because a lot of people just don't think about these things, until there's an emergency. So therefore, our goal is really try to, preventively prepare people or educate people. So when these types of things happen, somebody will know what to do and they practiced it. So therefore they can run through what to do with ease in a sense. Yep.
Can I ask a follow-up question about that?
Yes, sir.
Because you said something happened with Jordan's liver. What exactly happened with his liver? Because
Right.
you said he came out healthy that day, but then his liver, especially for him being young and healthy, how did that happen?
Sure. So, and I'm sorry I didn't explain that. So I tell people when you look at a heat-related injury, right? So you have heat exhaustion, and heat exhaustion escalates into heat stroke. So what that means is when your core body temperature goes above 104 degrees, right? Internally, right? That means, it's a myriad of several signs that will let you know this person is in danger. You literally have a 20 to 30 minute window to cool this person's core body temperature down. Whether you do it by ice, whether you do it by water, whether you do it by cold water tub, whether you put a person in a tarp, whether you put ice under their armpits, on their groins, on the back of their neck, on top of their heads. So basically, but keep in mind, when your core body temperature goes above 104 degrees, that's the equivalent of your body being in a microwave oven. All your organs start to cook. Because keep in mind, the body that lost control to cool itself down. So where all of us, when you sweat, that's the body's, cooling system, right? When we're working out or whatever the case may be. So when your body loses that control to cool itself down, that's when you're in the danger zone in a sense. So you literally have a 20 to 30 minute window to get this person in some ice and water to cool them down, right? As we say in this space, cool first, transport second, right? So in our case, in Jordan's case, you had 30 minutes to cool him down. But unfortunately, they didn't get Jordan to the ER until an hour and 37 minutes later. And his core body temperature was 106 degrees. So keep 106 and some change. So keep in mind, all of his stuff was cooking the whole time. So that core body, because they had already missed the window of opportunity, when you get to that, if you go past 30 minutes, more than likely the damage is irreparable. Meaning something's cooking, your liver's cooking, your kidneys cooking, your lungs cooking. It could be your heart. But again, keep in mind, you're in a microwave oven internally at 104. And anything above, you can imagine, is just cooking the whole time. So like I said, that window that they missed, that Jordan was, they saw him in distress. However, I think that the athletic trainer at the time really just didn't recognize in what level of distress he was in. Because what happens is, when your core body temperature goes, it almost starts with heat exhaustion. You got cramps. You may be vomiting, right? You may be dizzy. You may not sweat, even though you're warming up. And when you get to that point, we call it central nervous dysfunction. And central nervous dysfunction is like this person is drunk, right? They're aggressive. They're just kind of like out of their mind for the most part, unnaturally in a sense. So when I looked at, and this athletic trainer that, I threatened to do bodily harm early on when Jordan first passed because I wanted somebody to blame, we wound up getting together about 3.5 years later in a space of restorative forgiveness. And I'm asking him, tell me what happened. And he was like, we didn't practice the EAP. And now I'm looking at him and I'm looking at Jordan. Jordan's 6'5", 300 pounds, size 16 shoe. So once he was already in that central nervous dysfunction failure, he's like agitated, he's aggravated. So I'm looking at the athletic trainer. This guy might be 150 with a 50-pound rock in his pocket, wet. So now I'm looking at it like, wow, okay, y'all trying to control this guy. How you gonna put him in some water because he might drown or whatever? Because unfortunately, he was already in the danger zone, or he had been in the danger zone for a moment. Yeah. So that's what happened to his liver. His liver cooked prior to getting to the hospital. So that's why, he was in the damage. That's why we wound up getting a liver transplant.
Well, that's insane, man. I'm sorry about that.
No.
My question is this: as far as University of Maryland, what steps have they taken so far? Since that incident, have they implemented your strategies or anything?
Yeah. So, and this is the thing, early on, people used to ask me all the time, like, how can you still deal with University of Maryland? At the end of the day, this is with Jordan, his heart was at, his love was at, and don't get me wrong, at that particular time, you had Dr. Lowe was a school president at the time, right? And when I tell you, in a situation like this, when somebody, and he still has all my respect, man, because I'm an old school guy, and I deal with integrity and a good moral compass, right? And that's where that makes or breaks my level of respect for a person. And things happen. Anything can happen. And I like the fact that early on, he was like, look, we take full legal and moral responsibility for what happened to Jordan. Because it could have been so easy to say, hey, you know what, we just gonna kind of, not say anything and just kind of let this play out. Where, this guy had a level of integrity that just really just kind of went man, I mean, he earned my respect right out the gate. So it was a tad bit easy, even though it was a challenging situation, really in regards to your question, Maryland may be one of the safest places, even just from a reactionary perspective that, I mean, a kid can go to, and I'm still connected to the program. I talked to Coach Locks the other day. We got a different type of relationship. It ain't even about football, but still, I mean, Jordan Spirit is there. So at the end of the day, like man, I try not to operate. I can't operate. I don't have the opportunity to operate on a low vibration, and in regards to me trying to save other people's families, how can I sit there and still walk around, salty or tight? Guess what? None of this is guaranteed at all. We had Jordan for 19 wonderful years, man. And when I tell you he was a good kid, man, he just was a good dude, man. And he wasn't me. He was 1,000 times better than me at 19. I was already a statistic of Baltimore City at that time. But he was a kid that was just a good kid, man. And I wouldn't be surprised in hindsight. I can see why he had a higher calling, much more than what I expected. We always thought Jordan would play on Sundays. I never thought that this would have been his true purpose along the way, for sure.
And I got my follow-up question is, how has this experience completely motivated you to do what you're doing now? Like, how did you get that motivation to just be the guy that you are today?
Well, you know what? A lot of self-development, a lot of investment in self-development. So for me, it's interesting because like I had a public speaking background. Like everything I did was to be an example for Jordan, right? So I was always into public speaking, Toastmasters, all that type of stuff. I always knew I had a book in me. I would pick something up, put it down, pick something up, put it down. So for me, and the interesting thing was I was already in the advocacy space. At that time I owned a drug treatment facility in Baltimore City. So, we kind of started with transitional housing. So I was already a reentry advocate. So people coming home from long-term incarceration and things like that. And, obviously, just coming home, trying to get themselves together. So for me, when this happened, really, I felt like it was almost like, wow, was Jordan and God preparing me for this? You know what I mean? Because, I was already in that advocacy space. And the only thing that changed for me was the trajectory of the mission just changed, and of course, it's your child. So, those of you all, that are parents, and I'm sure any parent can understand, man, you will do anything for your kids shy of breaking the law. And if you got to break the law for you, we see it all the time. How many actors and actresses, was paying millions of dollars for their kids to get in school in these Ivy League colleges or whatever the case may be. I tell people a funny story all the time, man. When Jordan Ohio State started offering Jordan, a scholarship, which really they started showing interest in the 9th grade, right? And I never even really, I wasn't really a college football guy until he got into it, or he was in the process. But I remember one time that Jordan told me, he said, Ohio State they want us to come up this weekend. Now, keep in mind, like we're in the process of opening up our treatment facility. So we're in the credentialing process. I can see the ship, but I can see it, but it ain't there at the dock yet, right? And man, when I tell you, I was so freaking broke, man, everything was dirty. Like my tags was dirty. I had no car insurance. Health insurance went out the window. I went out the car dealership. My engine light was on. I went out the car dealership. My buddy got me a sticker. My tags is hot, the whole 9, right? But at the end of the day, we drove up to Columbus, Ohio, with dirty tags and, the engine light going on. I probably have borrowed some money for some gas money or hotel money or whatever the case may be. So, a lot of times that's the sacrifices that we'll make for our children to be successful. Like I say, short of breaking the law. And Jordan just got his driver's license. And he kept like, let me drive. I'm like, no, I got it. Because we coming down all these 1-lane these 2-lane roads, and you got the police, the sheriff of the local town sitting over there on the side of the road. So, again, man, we'll do whatever we got to do for them to be successful, man. And, I think as a parent, man, I was no different in regards to that. Like, we're going to do whatever it got to take. Hey, look, if you got to eat and I can't eat, man, whatever the case may be, for you to be successful, that's just what we're going to do.
Hey, Mr. McNair, question. So I'm gonna pivot a little bit. How did the relationship between you and Jordan's mom grow after this, or even, sometimes it is a down, then it's a up. Relationships go how they go, but from when the incident happened to now, how has it grown?
Well, let me tell you this, and I've just told somebody this today, right? Most people didn't know that Tanya, if you read one of my first book, man, Jordan's mom, Tanya, is we like siblings. Like, literally, I'm an only child. Me and Tanya have been joined at the hip for, 35 years at least, right? We was together, I want to say maybe 9 years before Jordan was born, right? And like I say, me being that statistic of the city, man, she just went through, she was ride or die with me, regardless of my ups, my downs. And luckily, when I turned it around, we were right there. So we didn't have Jordan till I was 30, she was 32, right? So, man, people don't know that me and Tanya, separated when Jordan was 6 months. I literally was just telling somebody that today. But the main thing that kept us together as a family unit was we co-parented very well. And early on, we kind of look beyond what you're doing, what I'm doing. Our main focus is him. So people would see us, man, out forever. And it's like, oh, damn, I saw you and your wife, and, y'all still together. We at all the games. But again, we just had, the main focus was him. And the interesting thing, when you talk about co-parenting, man, I think that's, we showed a successful template or a successful example of co-parenting, man. It ain't about what your emotional feelings are, what my emotional feelings. Our main thing is to get him to a level of success. And we made that pact very, very early on, right? So, and the interesting thing is, even after Jordan passed, really, Tanya and I might talk. Let me say this. My wife calls her my second wife. So you can imagine, right? Literally, it's just like I say, her family has always been my family. And, like I say, wonderful person, man. And I'm just grateful that, his mother was Tanya. And I'm just grateful that, really, man, she supported me, because when I said, you know what, we need to do a foundation, it was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's like, all right, I'm going to follow your lead. And I'm just grateful that, her and the rest of the family just believed in me enough where it's like, okay, we're going to follow his lead in regards to that. So, yeah, man, but the main goal, our level of success really just came from, that love for him, that love for one another, you know what I mean? And that self-love of, at the end of the day, we're going to make this happen regardless of what, no matter what, for his level of success. And I think that if more parents had that level of self-love, love for one another, and most importantly, love for the child, man, we'd have a lot more beautiful human beings in the world as a result of.
Let me ask you a two-part question, Mr. McNair.
Yeah,
Mr. McNair. What's the difference in the two books, and is there a third book coming?
Yeah, so actually, I wrote 2 books last year. So the first book is Can My Child Play? Because what happened was our story was in the media so much. We were probably in the media for about almost 3 years, right? And I felt as though I wanted to tell our story, right, from the inside out. Now, keep in mind, we were in litigation for about 3 years. And I was, you learn something every time you write a book as an author, right? What you could have did, what you should have did, I could have did this better. I could have been more efficient at that. And man, I learned, especially from a financial investment perspective. So one of the things was just do and Can My Child Play? I talk a little bit about my redemption, right, and my experience, but I didn't want to take away from Jordan's story, right? So I just kind of touched a little bit on my stuff. And when I wrote the book, it was more about, just, hey, what do most parents ask? Can my child play, or why aren't they playing? It really talks and teaches people or parents or readers to learn how to ask better questions in regards to your child's safety, no matter what level of competition they playing at, right? So that was Can My Child Play. The fifth quarter talks about, because in that relevancy space, all this is based off of what I felt like I should have taught Jordan. And fifth quarter, it's a parent's guide, because nowadays the collegiate landscape, especially from a college recruitment perspective, has changed so much from almost 7 years ago when Jordan passed, right? Now, like I said, Urban Meyer was talking about a lifetime scholarship, right? Now, you almost need, if you're smart, you need an accountant and a lawyer before you sign anybody's contract to come into a college right now. And the college landscape has just changed, because unless you just a super duper special kid, nowadays most coaches aren't even recruiting from high school. They're going straight into the transfer portal now. So most kids are even going to have to take an offer that they really don't want to take just to get into the college landscape, then jump in the portal themselves, really to get to another team at this point, right? Just to show their skill set. So, and the fifth quarter really focuses on, the things that really matter with young people now. So I wrote this curriculum. When you see Kobe behind me, that's Keep On Believing in Yourself. So we have a Keep On Believing in Yourself curriculum podcast. Of course, my podcast, I don't use StreamYard yet, but after the night, I probably will start using it.
We can help you out, Mr. McNair.
I need it, because, man, y'all got some serious stuff happening. So basically, one of the things that, with Kobe, it just really kind of started out as a one-pager. And, man, I wrote a high school curriculum, and basically it prepares student athletes for the collegiate level, meaning we talk about peer pressure. We talk about good decision-making. We talk about how to take care of your mental health. We talk about financial literacy. We talk about where do you fit in on a team, because most kids or high school kids just think, you're a big fish in a small pond. You putting up good numbers, whatever sport you playing, you're really good at it. And say you get recruited by a D1 school, right? The majority of the people on your team can do everything that you're doing. That's why they're there. However, as young people, what does that do to them mentally, right? Because I think young people think that it's a straight line, right? And it's going to work out the way I think it's going to work out. And we all know, you keep life, it never works out the way it's supposed to work out, right? So some of these kids going to get injured, right? So, but again, even in you getting injured, how do you sit there and stay confident? How do you stay resilient? How do you make good decisions? How do you not get caught up in peer pressure? Man, where's your leadership at? How do you use your voice? So these are all things that we really focused on in regards to that, right? Now, the interesting is the fifth quarter basically supports everything that we're teaching student athletes. But I think that the main thing is all education starts at home, because I look at everything I taught Jordan. If I always feel like if I taught Jordan to advocate, I always taught him to amplify his voice amongst his peers. Don't be afraid to fight. Somebody gets you wrong, you deal with it amongst your peers. I never taught him that around adults and coaches, because I always taught Jordan to be coachable, meaning coach say run through that brick wall, you run. Coach say jump off the cliff, you jump. But I'm telling kids nowadays, if coach ain't ran through that brick wall himself, don't follow him. Let him run through the brick wall. If coach jump off the cliff himself, you let him jump off the cliff. You don't do it. Because nowadays, unfortunately, coach going to keep getting a job. The coach at Maryland at the time, man, and I'm not wishing any negative energy on that guy, but man, this cat had 5 jobs since then. Ray Rice
and he was terrible here. I'll say it for you. I'll say it for you, Mr. McNair. He was terrible here, damn it.
Look, and Ray Rice just got a job as a JV coach somewhere. Am I right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So obviously you got that level of nepotism that goes along the way, man. That carries that's a whole nother subject. But I think that as parents, everything starts at home. So the fifth quarter talks about how to deal with your child, how to deal with recruitment, what questions to ask coaches. Don't be afraid to ask the serious questions. How to prepare your child to deal with their official visit. Because to me, official visit ain't nothing but a test to see if your kid is a leader or a follower. And the average parent knows their child. Do not send your child out there unprepared, and don't put them in a sink or swim situation and you know they're going to sink. So these are all things that, even one of the big things I talk about is how to legally protect your child. Meaning, when we first got legal representation, the very first question, one of our attorneys asked us was, do you have a power of attorney? And we like, for what? Well, he's 18, he's emancipated. And I'm just like, wow, we don't think about these things. We don't think, what if Jordan had been on the Midwest, or he was down south, or he was on the West Coast, and it would have took us days to get to him versus him being up the road where it only took us 45 minutes to get to the hospital. That would have been even worse of a nightmare, because at the end of the day, they really didn't have to tell us anything, as parents, you know what I mean? Now imagine, that from a financial perspective, when you're looking at collective deals, we ain't even gonna deal with NIL deals. We're gonna say collective deals, right? And we all know money don't come with no instructions. So you comfortable with a 19-year-old or 18-year-old signing the contract? Come on, that's nobody should be comfortable with that. And that's why I'm saying nowadays, just with the landscape of all this, it's a business nowadays. So I think every parent, I talk about that. I got a sports agent that answered some questions and just kind of broke it down. Like, look, I interviewed a sports agent for the book, where it was just like, you need to talk about, finance. You need financial literacy 101, and a lot of parents really just don't discuss that. So, really, the book is really just like a really good guide, and just really how to prepare your kids. So it's an adult version of Kobe, the curriculum in a sense. And I think that it keeps both parent and student athlete on the same page in regards to preparing them for that level of success. Because most importantly, we all know, right? Those numbers, every kid think they want to get to the NFL. And that's the point I was making when I was talking to my friend earlier. Every kid say they want to make it to the league, right? Whatever league that is, until you see what that work ethic really looks like. So when you look at, NFL players, you got out of 8 million student athletes, you got 6% to go to a Division I school, right? You have 1.6% of football players that get to the NFL. Now just think, you got 105 guys on a Division I team. 1.6 are going to go. Especially if you're looking at a Maryland, or unless you're looking at a powerhouse, you may have a couple more, but it still balances out. 1.6. So that means you got 1.5 dudes, just 1.6 guys that's going to go to the league. Even at the NBA, you got 2 to 3% of those kids that's going to go to play on a professional level. Everybody think they can do it early on until they see what that work ethic really consists of. And a lot of kids just don't really have that work ethic really to even play at that level. So our goal with the fifth quarter is really to talk about how do we prepare them for life after sports. And as a parent, if you think about anything other than life after sports, you think about the wrong thing. And I used to tell Jordan that all the time. Even if you did make it to the next level, bro, you'll be done. If you make it 4 years, you've done good. So if you make it 4 years, you're going to be 27, 28. Now what? What you going to do now? Now that's just, that's a nanosecond of your life. So, these are just things that, we really cover. And I cover another funny thing is how to protect your child. I mean, not funny, serious, how to protect your child legally. A lot of people don't know you need a power of attorney. When your kid goes away to college, especially out of town, you need to have a power of attorney legally and financially. Because at the end of the day, you do not, a friend of mine, I share stories like anecdotal type stories, other people's story. A friend of mine, her son went to school in Tennessee. He was a non-athlete. Man, that dude got his first piece and lost his mind. Flunked out immediately. He studied playing the Leroy. He's playing like he's studying class. She don't even know he done flunked out. Till one of her friends saw him somewhere off campus one day when he should have been in class. This man is straight flunked out. He didn't even say nothing. She's still paying tuition. So stories like that, are kind of like real life stories that everybody can relate to. And I've heard that story numerous times about, kids just not really, being focused when they went to college. And another friend of mine, her daughter had was a basketball player and was in Florida, and called home hysterical one day as soon as she got down there. And she was asking her, she said, calm down, what's going on? And she said, Mom, they left me. They went to the grocery store and they left me, right? And she's super duper over the top excited. And her mother said, well, what you want me to do? You want me to come to Florida and take you to the grocery store? But kids in that moment, that's real to them. So when you look at, their ability to deal with these real life or problem solve at this level, a lot of kids don't have that skill set. So she told her, look, calm down, get yourself together, get on your bike, put your backpack on and ride to the grocery store. But really, what you want me to do? You want me to come to Florida and take you to the grocery store? But again, to a young person, that in that moment, that's very, very real. So these are the things that we have to prepare our children for, like how to utilize mental health resources, because mental health is taken very, very seriously at the collegiate level now. It's 4 things that the average college student suffers from: depression, anxiety, substance abuse, and eating disorders. Those are the main things. So, we have to prepare our children to know when these things are triggered. You got to know to say, all right, well, here's the mental health office on campus, or this is the person that does the mental health. And you got to teach them to speak up for themselves where, they can protect themselves as well. Yep.
Mr. McNair, before we get you out of here, what's next? What can the people do to keep up with the foundation? And any final words from you, sir?
Yeah, thank you. The big thing for us is, man, really, we do a lot of stuff in Maryland, but surprisingly, Atlanta is like our second state, the state of Georgia. So we do a ton of stuff down there. One of the big things that we focusing on right now is, we focusing on one-day student athlete summits. So I encourage everybody, we're going to try to get a couple of those before the school year ends up here and in Georgia as well. It's easier just to kind of touch, do a more like a 1-to-many ratio. So we'll have some upcoming one-day student athlete summits, and we'll have panel discussions. We'll have breakout groups, not only for student athletes, but parents as well, where, we're talking about our Kobe curriculum, like how to protect yourself from a mental health, everything I had talked about tonight. So, we're trying to partner with some schools right now, some high schools, where we just kind of do like one central location and just invite all the surrounding schools that may be in that conference or that district, more than likely the districts, to come out. And, really, like, the main thing is just really education. Like, how do we keep everybody educated? And because a lot of times, parents just don't know, and I think a lot of times, as one of you brothers just said, that information has to come from people that that are relatable. And I think that, really, in regards to the information that we offer is very, very valuable or invaluable to, the actual process in a sense. And I ask everybody, hey, man, please grab a copy of Can My Child, the 5th quarter, or Can My Child Play? I'm trying to catch the camera right there. Go to the Jordan McNair Foundation.org, grab your copy, you get an autographed copy from me. But hey, if you want to go to Amazon, Barnes & Noble online, Ingram Spark, I'm on all those platforms as well. But, I feel like, yes, really, the power of printed books is so significant because we live just in the age of digital and we can all subscribe to that, because it's so much easier. But, as an author, the power of print is crucial. So I ask everybody, go online, grab a copy. And Jordan's birthday is coming up March the 3rd. And that's when we just usually do a big giving campaign. Man, I'm just asking 10 people to tell 10 other people, man, to purchase a copy of the book at $19.99. Yep.
Not now, right now. Click on that link. Go purchase the book. Support the Jordan McNair Foundation, and happy heavenly birthday to Jordan. I'm actually the 6th Mr. McNair.
Oh, nice.
So
I'm the
Pisces
20th.
season.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All
so
right, you
Pisces
sound like
season
you
is
seem like a good dude. Okay, cool. Way to go, Dre. You got a good team, bro.
Thank you. Hey, man, they were crazy enough to let me host this show, so I guess I'm doing all right.
My man. Sure. The Wizards got a W tonight, huh? Good.
Yes. Yeah, we couldn't play our sound, but we'll play it.
Come on now, say it with me. Everybody beats the Wiz.
Who they play tonight?
I think it was the Nets. I think it was the Nets.
Yeah, bro.
He said, "Don't matter."